I speak 11 languages, the young woman in handcuffs said. The justice roared with laughter. Sure, and I'm the bloody prime minister. He scoffed in front of the entire court. But when she opened her mouth, his laugh froze. The Supreme Court of New South Wales had never been so packed. Every seat was taken. People were standing against the walls, and journalists with their cameras off waited for the exact moment to capture the day's biggest scoop. The collective murmur created a symphony of expectation that made the air conditioning unit of the old sandstone justice building hum. Jasmine Jazz Tran walked towards the dock in handcuffs. Her steps echoed in the sudden silence that fell when Sheriff's Officer Doug Williams yelled, "All rise, the court is now in session." Everyone stood as Justice Lachlan "Lucky" Sinclair entered through the side door carrying a messy pile of documents. He was a robust bloke, with grey hair perfectly slicked back, and the kind of expression that only years of sentencing others can carve onto a face, a mix of boredom, superiority, and occasional disdain. "You may be seated," Justice Sinclair ordered, dropping the documents onto his desk with a dry thud that startled several onlookers. Jazz remained standing between two sheriff's officers, with Bronwyn "Bronnie" Davis, her legal aid solicitor, at her left. Bronnie was a middle-aged woman carrying the weight of too many cases and too little budget. She had pronounced bags under her eyes and that barely perceptible tremor in her hands that signals an excess of flat whites and a chronic lack of sleep. Case number 47B, 2024, announced the court registrar. The Crown versus Jasmine Tran. Charges: obtaining financial advantage by deception, identity fraud, and aggravated fraud. The murmur returned to the room like a wave. Jazz felt hundreds of eyes boring into her back, judging her before any evidence had been presented. She knew that feeling. She'd felt it all her life, growing up in the outer burbs of Western Sydney. Senior Crown Prosecutor Alistair Finch rose with theatrical movements, adjusting his silk tie as if he were an actor on opening night. He was a slender man with sharp features who spoke with that private school accent that immediately establishes hierarchies in any room. "Your Honor," Finch began, his voice resonating, "we have before us a young woman who has perpetrated one of the most elaborate frauds this court has ever seen. For months, Miss Tran posed as a certified translator, offering services to multinational firms, educational institutions, and even government agencies." He paused dramatically, walking slowly in front of the jury box. She collected tens of thousands of dollars for translations she supposedly performed in 11 different languages. 11, Your Honor. But the reality is, this young woman barely finished high school and has no certification, no uni degree, no credentials to back up her supposed linguistic ability. Finch turned towards Jazz with a smile that was meant to be compassionate, but dripped with condescension. "We understand that financial necessity can lead people down the wrong path, but fraud is fraud, no matter the circumstances. Miss Tran is, quite simply, an Aussie battler who tried to pull a fast one. Videong and formander liv ride. They have a intwilevind." Jazz clenched her fists inside the handcuffs. Every word from the prosecutor was like a hammer blow to her dignity, not because they were true, but because no one seemed interested in hearing her side. Justice Sinclair glanced through the documents with an expression of profound boredom, as if this were just another case on his endless roster. He yawned, a big, sloppy gala of a yawn, without bothering to cover his mouth. "Does the defense have anything to say before we proceed?" he asked in a monotone, without even looking up from the papers. Bronnie Davis cleared her throat. Her hands trembled as she held her worn notepad. "Your Honor, my client maintains her innocence. The charges presented are based on misunderstandings and a lack of communication with her employers. Miss Tran is prepared to demonstrate that she possesses the capabilities she claims to have." This side, Gudu. Demonstrate? Justice Sinclair finally looked up, his eyebrows arching with mocking interest. "And how exactly does she plan to demonstrate she speaks 11 languages? Is she going to sing us the home and away theme song in each one? We're not running a bloody talent show here, Miss Davis." Some nervous titters broke out from the public gallery. The justice smiled, pleased with his own humor. "Your Honor, with all due respect." Bronnie tried to continue, but Sinclair cut her off with a dismissive wave of his hand. "Miss Davis, I've reviewed this brief. Your client is 23. She grew up in the commission flats, and according to the records, she was doing the cleaning rounds before this alleged translation business. There's no record of higher education, no international accreditation, nothing to suggest this young woman could speak even 3 languages, let alone 11. When you are there not porting four things, a masa, and we've forwarding fived. It was then that Jazz raised her head. Her eyes, which had been fixed on the floor throughout the hearing, met the justices directly. There was fire in that look. There were years of humiliation, of being underestimated, of being invisible. "Permission to speak, Your Honor," she said, her voice clear and firm. Sinclair looked at her, surprised. Most defendants stayed silent during preliminary hearings, letting their lawyers speak for them. But there was something in the way this young woman looked at him that caused a mix of irritation and curiosity. "Do you have anything relevant to add to the matter?" he asked, skeptical. "I speak 11 languages." Jazz enunciated each word with crystal clarity, without a hint of doubt in her voice. "And I can prove it right here, right now, if Your Honor allows me." The silence that followed was so profound that you could hear the buzz of the fluorescent lights on the ceiling. Everyone present leaned forward, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. And then Justice Lachlan Sinclair did something no one expected. He threw his head back and let out a roar of laughter. It wasn't polite or contained laughter. It was a thunderous, almost hysterical guffaw that shook his portly frame on the bench. "This is unbelievable," he exclaimed between laughs, wiping tears from his eyes with a handkerchief. "The accused wants to demonstrate she speaks 11 languages right here in my court. A fair dinkum joke." Other laughs joined the justices. Crown Prosecutor Finch smiled broadly, shaking his head in disbelief. Some members of the public laughed openly, others whispered mocking comments. "Miss Tran." Sinclair managed to control his laughter enough to speak, though his voice still trembled with amusement. "I appreciate your larrikin spirit, but this is a court of law, not a Big Brother audition. We are not going to waste the court's time with circus demonstrations." "Do you consider justice a circus?" Jazz's voice cut through the air like a knife. The justice's laughter instantly froze. His eyes narrowed, and for a moment a dangerous silence filled the room. "Excuse me?" His voice dropped to a threatening tone. Jazz took a step forward, ignoring the warning tug Bronny Davis gave her on the arm. "With all due respect, Your Honor, you just laughed at me without hearing me out. You've judged me without allowing me to present my defense. If that's not a circus, I don't know what is." Sheriff's Officer Williams stepped forward, ready to intervene if the situation escalated, but the justice raised a hand to stop him. Sinclair leaned forward, resting his elbows on the desk. "You've got guts, Miss Tran. I'll give you that. But guts won't save you from the evidence against you." "The evidence lies," Jazz retorted. "Or rather, the people who interpreted it lied, because they never bothered to check if I truly could do what I claimed. I'm the invisible woman who understands more about their contracts than they do." "And why should we do that?" Finch interjected from his seat. "Why should the Crown waste resources verifying the fantastical claims of someone clearly trying to dodge the consequences of her actions? Because that's your bloody obligation." Jazz turned towards the prosecutor, her voice gaining strength. "Your obligation is to seek the truth, not assume guilt based on prejudice." "Order." Sinclair banged his gavel against the desk. "Miss Tran, you are treading dangerous ground. I suggest you stay silent before I charge you with contempt. In the facted, the process, and frenters. With you in devasing doer the frenters." Jazz took a deep breath. She could feel her heart pounding so hard she thought everyone in the room could hear it. But she wasn't going to back down. Not this time. She'd been backing down her whole life. "Your Honor," Bronny Davis hurried to interject, her voice shaky but determined. "I formally request that my client be allowed to demonstrate her linguistic capabilities. If she can prove she speaks the languages she claims, it would fundamentally change the nature of this case." "And thankfulation. And cancerfroke. And cancerfroke. And cancerfroke." Sinclair looked at her with a mix of disbelief and annoyance. "Miss Davis, are you seriously suggesting we turn this court into a TAFE language exam?" "I'm suggesting we give my client a fair go to properly defend herself," Bronny replied, finding a reserve of courage she didn't know she possessed. "Isn't that what justice represents?" The justice leaned back in his chair, which groaned under his weight. He stared at Jazz for a long moment, his eyes evaluating her as if she were a puzzle he couldn't solve. There was something about this young woman that unsettled him. It wasn't just her audacity, it was the absolute certainty in her eyes. "All right," he said finally, to the surprise of everyone in the room. "I'll give you your chance to publicly make a fool of yourself. But when you fail, and you will fail, I'm going to add charges of contempt and obstruction of justice to your already considerable list of legal troubles." He turned to his registrar. "Contact the School of Languages at the University of Sydney. I need them to send me 11 professors, one specialist in each of the languages Miss Tran claims to speak. and tell them to send the strictest ones they've got. We're not mucking around." Jazz felt an electrical current run through her body. She would finally get her chance. Finally, someone would listen. "Miss Tran." Justice Sinclair looked at her with that mocking smile he had perfected over decades. "I hope you know what you're doing, because when this is over, I'm not just going to find you guilty of fraud. The whole country will know exactly what kind of liar you are." "I'm not a liar," Jazz responded, her voice calm but firm. "And when this is over, you're going to have to apologize." 12 Ford, then a crashed of the momentime, and the business for Kaimend, and a nofe, in the yes. Wishi Taimend, the no. The room erupted in scandalized whispers. No one, absolutely no one spoke to Justice Sinclair like that. Silence. The gavel banged again. Sinclair looked at Jazz with a mixture of fury and something that might have been respect. "This hearing is adjourned until the assessors are present. That will be in 3 days. And believe me, Miss Tran, those 3 days will be the last taste of freedom you'll enjoy for a long time. No found, and videa, dodia, and faft, or the fafta." As the sheriff's officers escorted her out of the room, Jazz couldn't help but wonder if she had made the biggest mistake of her life, or if she had finally taken the first step toward the vindication she craved. What she didn't know was that the coming days would reveal secrets that would change not only her fate but that of everyone present in that courtroom. The metallic clang of the doors closing resonated like thunder in Jazz's ears. The Long Bay Remand Center was a 3-story building that smelled of industrial disinfectant mixed with human despair. The white walls, chipped at the corners, seemed to absorb all the natural light that tried to enter through the small barred windows. Jazz walked down the corridor flanked by 2 officers. Her handcuffs had been removed, but the sense of oppression remained, now invisible but heavier than any metal. Other inmates watched her from their cells, some with curiosity, others with that vacant look that only prolonged confinement can create. "Cell 47C, announced Officer Jess Torres, a young woman with a professional but not cruel expression. She opened the metal door with a screech that echoed down the hallway. "You've got a roomie. Hope you two get along." Jazz stepped inside, and the door closed behind her with a definitive thump that made her flinch. The cell was small, 2 narrow bunks, a small basin, a toilet with no privacy, and a window so high it only served to remind them that the outside world existed but was out of reach. In the lower bunk, a middle-aged woman looked up from a well-thumbed paperback. Carmo Evans had a face marked by lines that told stories she would probably never share. Her gray hair was pulled back in a tight braid, and her eyes, though tired, still held a spark of intelligence. "So you're the famous polyglot," Carmel said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "The whole center's talking about you." The girl who told off Justice Sinclair and lived to tell the tale. Jazz sat on the upper bunk, feeling the thin, hard mattress beneath her body. She didn't respond immediately. She was exhausted, not just physically but emotionally. The adrenaline of the hearing had evaporated, leaving only a heavy void in her chest. "I'm not famous," she finally said. "I'm just someone who got sick of being underestimated." Carmel let out a dry laugh. "In here we're all sick of something. The difference is, most of us have already given up. You still have fire. That's dangerous in a place like this." "Dangerous? Why?" "Because hope hurts more than resignation." Carmel closed her book. "Do you really speak 11 languages?" Jazz nodded, looking at the stained ceiling of the cell. 12, actually. But nobody asked. 12. Carmel sat up, genuinely interested. "How is it possible that a girl your age, from the burbs, speaks 12 languages?" For the first time in days, Jazz felt like talking. Maybe because Carmel wasn't looking at her with mockery or disdain. Maybe because in that small, claustrophobic space, they were just 2 human beings trying to survive. "My Nana," Jazz began, her voice softening with the memory. "Nana Lutran. She worked her whole life as a cleaner for diplomatic families posted to the high commissions in Canberra and the consulates in Sydney. Every time one family left, another one arrived. Germans, French, Chinese, Russians, Arabs, Koreans. She learned bits of all those languages just to be able to communicate, to be indispensable." Carmel listened in silence as Jazz continued. "When my folks died in a bus accident, I was 5. Nana took me in and brought me with her to all those houses. While she was mopping, cooking, and folding laundry, I sat with those families' kids. I played with them, ate with them, learned with them." Her voice cracked slightly with the memory. "The diplomats changed every 2 or 3 years. Every time I made a friend, they left. Every time I learned to communicate perfectly in one language, a new family with a different language arrived. But I never stopped learning. It was my way of keeping those memories, Those connections, alive. Well, have the stores the lathe to us. And your Nana? Carmel asked softly. She passed away 2 years ago. Heart attack. 50 years of working sun up to sundown finally killed her. Jazz closed her eyes tight. And I was left alone, with no formal education, no certificates to prove what I knew, just languages in my head, and no way to show they were real. So you started working as a translator, Carmel completed. I tried to get jobs at official agencies, but they all wanted uni degrees, international certifications. No one would even give me a chance to demonstrate what I could do. The frustration was palpable in her voice, so I set up my own gig. I offered my services online, charged less than the big agencies, and did an impeccable job, a fair dinkum job. So, why are you here? Jazz opened her eyes and looked at Carmel directly. Because someone decided it was impossible for a girl without a university education to do what I was doing. They reported my services as fraud, without even verifying the quality of my work. And now I'm here, waiting to prove something I never should have had to prove. The sound of approaching footsteps interrupted their conversation. The door opened, and Officer Torres reappeared. Tran, you've got a visitor. Interview room. Jazz climbed down from the bunk, confused. She hadn't called anyone. She had no one to call. The interview room was a small space, divided by a metal table. Sitting on the other side was Bronnie Davis, her solicitor, but she wasn't alone. Next to her was an elegant, professional woman Jazz didn't know, with a leather briefcase on the table. Jazz, this is Dr. Elena Vasquez. Bronnie made the introductions. She's a forensic psychologist. Crown Prosecutor Finch requested a psychological evaluation before the next hearing. Jazz felt a knot forming in her stomach. Psychological evaluation? Why? Dr. Vasquez spoke with a calm, professional voice. It's standard procedure in cases where the accused presents behavior that could be considered unusual. Your confrontation with Justice Sinclair raised a few flags. Flags? Jazz felt indignation rising. Defending myself is unusual behavior? It's not about that. Bronnie intervened quickly. Jazz, listen. The prosecutor is trying to build a profile suggesting you have tendencies toward pathological fantasy. They want to argue that you genuinely believe you speak those languages, when in reality, you don't. That's ridiculous. Jazz slammed her palm on the table. I'm not bonkers. No one is saying you are. Dr. Vasquez maintained her neutral tone. But I need to make my assessment. I'm going to ask you some questions, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Where the nated Belden 2 and 5 remended. For the next hour, Jazz answered question after question about her childhood, her parents' death, living with her Nana, learning languages, feeling alone, her fears, her dreams, her frustrations. Doctor, Vasquez took meticulous notes, her expression impossible to read. One last question, she finally said. Have you ever felt that people don't understand you, that you live in a different world from everyone else? Jazz thought carefully before answering. Every single day of my life, but not because I'm crazy, but because I've lived in worlds most people will never experience. I've spoken in languages most people will never learn. I've seen how words can build bridges or raise walls. So yes, I live in a different world, but it's real. It's as real as the prejudice that brought me here. The doctor closed her notebook. Thank you for your cooperation, Jasmine. I will present my report before the hearing. When she left, Bronnie approached Jazz, her expression worried. There's something else you need to know. Justice Sinclair contacted the University of Sydney, but it wasn't just to get assessors. What do you mean? He investigated your background further. He found something. Bronnie took some documents from her briefcase. Years ago, when you were 17, you applied for a scholarship to the International Language Academy. Remember that? Jazz nodded slowly. I was rejected. They said my application was unrealistic because I claimed to speak too many languages for my age. Exactly. And Sinclair is using that as evidence that you've been lying about your abilities for years. He argues it's a pattern of fraudulent behavior. He's painting you as a fraudster from the get-go. The room seemed to shrink around Jazz. Every time she tried to move forward, the system pushed her back. Every attempt to prove her worth became another piece of evidence against her. Is there anything else? She asked, dreading the answer. Bronnie hesitated before continuing. The assessors coming in. Sinclair specifically requested the most severe professors, known for being extremely rigorous. They're not coming to give you a fair go, Jazz. They're coming to tear you down. The silence that followed was crushing. Jazz could feel the weight of the entire justice system pressing against her, trying to crush that spark of hope still burning in her chest. How long do I have? She finally asked. 2 more days. The hearing is the day after tomorrow. Then I need to use every second. Jazz stood up, her determination renewed despite everything. Bronny, I need you to get me something. Books, study materials, in all the languages you can find. If they're going to make this hard, I'm going to prepare like I never have in my life. Bronny looked at her with a mix of admiration and sadness. Jazz, even if you prove you speak those languages, the prosecutor has other charges. The clients who reported fraud, the complaints about incorrect translations. Incorrect translations? Jazz interrupted. What incorrect translations? There are 3 clients who claim the translations you did contained serious errors that cost them money and reputation. Corporate counsel Richard Blake mentioned them specifically. Jazz felt as if she had been punched in the gut. That's impossible. I checked every translation 3 times. I was meticulous. I would never, ever have handed in something with serious errors. Never. Do you have copies of those translations? All of them, on my laptop, but the police confiscated it as evidence. Bronny made a note. I'll request access to those files. If we can prove the translations were correct, it will dismantle part of the prosecutor's accusation. When Jazz returned to her cell, Carmel was waiting with a curious expression. Bad news. Worse and worse? Jazz slumped onto her bunk. Not only do I have to prove I speak 11 languages in front of professors who've already decided I'm lying, I also have to prove that translations I know I did correctly are error-free and defend myself from a psychological evaluation that will probably paint me as delusional. Carmel whistled softly. When I said you had fire, I wasn't joking. But Jazz, are you sure you want to keep going with this? You could take a deal, serve a lesser sentence, get on with your life. Go on with my life and give up? Jazz looked at the ceiling. Accept that the world is right and I'm wrong? I can't, Carmel. If I give up now, I'd be betraying my Nana, all those years of learning, all those young girls who have talent but don't have the papers to prove it. I'd be letting the tall poppies win. Then rest up. Carmel turned off the cell light. Because in 2 days, you're going to need every ounce of strength you've got. In the darkness, Jazz closed her eyes, but couldn't sleep. Her mind went over vocabulary, grammar, idioms in each of the languages she had learned. But more than that, she thought of all the times she had been underestimated, ignored, dismissed. The world was about to see what she was capable of. She only hoped it would be enough. The dawn broke over the Remand Center with that heavy silence that only exists in places where freedom is a distant memory. Jazz hadn't slept. Her eyes burned with fatigue, but her mind continued to process verbal conjugations, grammatical structures, and idiomatic expressions in Mandarin, Arabic, German, French. Carmel snored softly in the lower bunk, a comforting sound amidst so much uncertainty. Jazz had spent the night whispering words in a low voice, each language flowing like rivers converging in the ocean of her memory. The sound of approaching footsteps interrupted her concentration. It was too early for breakfast. The metal door opened, and Officer Torres appeared with a serious expression. Tran, you've got a visitor. Interview room. Now. Carmel woke up startled. This early? Who visits anyone before the crack of dawn? Jazz climbed out of her bunk, her heart starting to beat faster. She followed Torres down the empty corridors, the echo of their steps resonating like war drums. When they reached the interview room, the surprise on Jazz's face was evident. Sitting on the other side of the table was a man of Asian descent with an anguished expression and a business briefcase on his lap. She recognized him immediately. Mr. Chan? Jazz whispered, incredulous. David Chan stood up abruptly, his hands visibly trembling. He was one of the 3 clients who had reported her translations as fraudulent. He worked for a technology company that needed documents translated from English to Mandarin for an expansion in China. Miss Tran, I need to speak to you. His voice was broken, as if each word cost him a physical effort. I don't have much time. My solicitor doesn't know I'm here. And though. There body of una dog sense. When we do so the... Torres closed the door but remained inside. Standard protocol for unofficial visits. What are you doing here? Jazz sat down slowly, trying to process this surreal situation. Chan ran his hands over his face, and Jazz noticed the deep bags under his eyes, the tension in his shoulders. I came to tell you the truth I should have told from the beginning. The silence that followed was so dense that Jazz could hear her own pulse. Your translations were perfect. Chan let out the words as if he had been holding his breath for months. Every document you translated for my company was impeccable, better than any professional agency we'd ever used. The partners in Beijing were impressed with the technical precision and cultural sensitivity. a top-notch job. Jazz felt as if the floor were moving beneath her. Then why? Because my boss, the CEO, found out I had contracted your services without verifying your university credentials. Chan lowered his gaze, the shame evident in every line of his face. He threatened to fire me if I didn't find a way to justify why I had spent company funds on an uncertified translator. And he decided to trash your life to save his job. Jazz felt a mix of fury and vindication growing in her chest. He tried to destroy my reputation and my freedom for an internal office cover-up. It wasn't that simple. Chan looked up, his eyes shining with unshed tears. Corporate counsel Richard Blake suggested we report the translations as defective. He said it was the only way to recover the money and protect the company from any legal liability. He suggested we lie. He suggested protecting corporate interests, Chan corrected bitterly. In the business world, Miss Tran, the truth is secondary to financial survival. But I haven't been able to sleep since I signed that false declaration. I have a daughter your age. Every time I look at her, I see your face on the news, being publicly humiliated for something you didn't do. I'm an absolute coward. Jazz took a deep breath, trying to control the emotions that threatened to overwhelm her. Why are you telling me this now? Why not before the trial? Because I am a coward, Chan admitted, his voice breaking. Because I needed my job, my salary, my reputation. But seeing what they've done to you, seeing Justice Sinclair laughing at you on TV, was too much. My wife told me last night she couldn't continue living with a man without honor, and she was right. He pulled a thick envelope from his briefcase. Here it is. Copies of the original translations with approvals from our Beijing partners, emails where they specifically praise your work, and my sworn statutory declaration admitting I lied under corporate pressure. Jazz took the envelope with trembling hands. It was heavy, filled with pages that could completely change her case. Mr. Chan, do you understand what this means for you? She asked softly. Admitting perjury could send you to the gaol. I know, Chan smiled sadly. But I'd rather be in gaol with my honor intact than free as a liar. My daughter deserves a father she can be proud of. Torres approached the table. Sir, I need to escort you out. This visit is already irregular. Chan stood up, but before leaving, he looked Jazz directly in the eyes. Miss Tran, you are extraordinary. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. And if I may offer one piece of advice, when you're in that courtroom tomorrow, don't just prove you speak those languages. Prove why it matters. Prove that real talent doesn't need certificates to be valid. You're a true Aussie battler, fighting the system. When he left, Jazz remained alone in the room, clutching the envelope as if it were a lifesaver. Tears she had been holding back for days finally began to fall. They weren't tears of sadness, but of relief mixed with rage for everything she had had to endure because of corporate lies. The door opened again, and Bronnie Davis rushed in, her hair slightly disheveled, and her expression one of controlled panic. Jazz, what was that? Torres called me saying David Chan was here. What did he want? Jazz handed her the envelope. Our bloody salvation. As Bronnie frantically reviewed the documents, her eyes widened with each page. This is unbelievable. With this, we can completely dismantle the fraud charges. We can prove the translations were correct and that the accusations were fabricated. This is fair dinkum good news. But will it be enough? Jazz asked. I still have to prove I speak the languages, and the prosecutor will probably say Chan is lying now to help me. You're right. Bronnie sat down, her mind working at full speed. We need more. We need to find the other 2 clients who accused you. And then to viso integrate. Find undertens the rumen, and Itun Finov. And how do we do that from here? Bronnie pulled out her phone. Leave it to me. I have contacts. If Chan had a conscience attack, maybe the others will too. Over the next few hours, while Jazz was escorted back to her cell, Bronnie worked frantically, making calls, sending emails, leveraging every contact she had in her legal arsenal. Back in the cell, Carmel watched Jazz with curiosity. Something changed, she said simply. You've got a different look on your face. No tu have subses, untu have, aro tu have subses. One of my accusers came to confess that he lied. Jazz sat down, still processing everything. Turns out my translations were perfect. They falsely accused me to protect corporate interests. Carmel whistled softly. The system protecting itself. Same old story. But this time someone had the courage to tell the truth. Jazz looked out the small, high window. He risked everything to clear my name. And that gives you hope. It gives me more than hope. It gives me proof that I'm not crazy, that I'm not wrong, that the world is wrong about me. A metallic sound echoed down the hallway. It was the mobile library hour, a trolley that passed twice a week with books for the inmates. A young woman pushed the trolley, stopping at each cell. When she reached cell 47, Jazz recognized her. It was Sophie Morales, a girl barely 19 she had seen in the dining hall. She had intelligent eyes and that particular sadness of someone who has seen too much, too young. "Any books you need?" Sophie asked softly. "Do you have anything in foreign languages?" Jazz asked hopefully. Sophie's eyes lit up. "Are you the girl who's going to prove she speaks 11 languages?" 12, actually. I've got something for you." Sophie looked nervously both ways down the hall before pulling out a package wrapped in paper. "Your solicitor asked me to bring you this. I shouldn't, but, well, I believe in a fair go." Jazz unwrapped the package and found 6 books in different languages: Mandarin, Arabic, Russian, German, French, and Portuguese. They weren't ordinary books, but complex legal and technical texts. "Your solicitor said to practice with these," Sophie whispered. "The professors tomorrow are going to try to trip you up with specialized technical vocabulary. Dollar, impressioned, with kein Cent, dollar. How do you know?" "Because one of them, Professor Andrew Drew Vaughn, came to make a legal query here a few days ago. I overheard him talking to the director about how to expose an imposter who claimed impossible linguistic abilities." Jazz's blood ran cold. "Did he say anything else?" "He said he'd prepared specialized technical texts in each language: medical, legal, scientific vocabulary, things only someone with years of formal university study would know. He wants to prove you're a dud." Carmel sat up in her bunk. "That's cheating. They're setting up an exam designed for you to fail." "It's not cheating if they never promise to be fair." Jazz opened the first book, her eyes scanning the Mandarin pages. "But I can learn. I've always been able to learn." "You've got less than 24 hours, Sophie pointed out. "How are you going to memorize technical vocabulary in 6 languages in one day?" Jazz looked at her with that fierce determination that had kept her alive all her life. "The same way I've done everything else, without giving up. My nana used to say, 'The world will tell you 1,000 times you can't, pet. You only need to prove them wrong once.'" When Sophie left, Carmel watched Jazz open book after book, her concentration absolute. "You know what's most impressive about you?" Carmel said after a long silence. "It's not that you speak languages. It's that you never accept defeat as an option." Jazz spent the rest of the day and all night immersed in those books. She barely ate, barely moved. Carmel brought her water, reminded her to breathe, but Jazz was in another world, a world of words, meanings, linguistic connections. When the first light of dawn began to filter through the high window, Jazz closed the last book. Her eyes were red, her body trembled with exhaustion, but there was something different in her expression. "Ready?" Carmel asked. "Bloody oath, I'm ready," Jazz replied. Torres arrived early. "Tran, it's time. Your solicitor is waiting. Today's the day." As she walked down the corridors toward the exit, other inmates began to bang on their cell doors. It wasn't a threatening sound, but one of support. Many of them had heard her story. Many of them had been judged for what the system thought they were, rather than for who they truly were. "Show him, Mate," someone yelled. "Don't let him crush ya." Another voice joined in. Jazz felt a strange energy course through her body. She wasn't alone. She had never been alone. All those anonymous faces behind the metal doors were reminders that there were more people like her, waiting for a chance to prove their truth. Bronny was waiting for her in the processing area with something unexpected, a small garment bag. "What's this?" Jazz asked. "Your future, if all goes well." Bronny opened the bag, revealing a sharp, professional tailored dress and jacket. "You're not walking into that courtroom as a defendant. You're walking in as the professional you are. The invisible woman is done. Today, you're visible." While Jazz changed, Bronny gave her the latest news. "I found the second client. He's willing to testify that his accusation was also false. The third one still isn't responding, but 2 out of 3 is enough to create reasonable doubt." "And the psychological evaluation?" Bronny grimaced. Dr. Vasquez presented her report. "It's mixed. She doesn't say you're crazy, but she doesn't completely defend you either. She suggests you have an unconventional personality, with high confidence in autodidactic abilities. That's just a fancy way of saying they don't trust me. Very fine one, Iskan." "Exactly. That's why you need to be perfect today, not just good perfect." The transport vehicle took them to the court. The building looked different in the morning light, more imposing, more intimidating, like a Roman Colosseum where gladiators fought for their lives. But Jazz was no longer the same person who had entered there days ago. Now she had proof, she had allies, and more importantly, she had the truth. The courtroom was even more crowded than the first time. News cameras filled every permitted corner. Journalists whispered among themselves, and in the front row, 11 professors from the University of Sydney waited with expressions ranging from curiosity to open disdain. Justice Sinclair entered with the same arrogance as always, but when his gaze met Jazz's, something shifted in his eyes. Perhaps he recognized that this wouldn't be the easy victory he had anticipated. "Let the show begin," he muttered, banging his gavel. And so began the day that would change everything. Justice Sinclair's gavel resonated like a gunshot in the packed courtroom. The collective murmur instantly faded, replaced by a tension so dense that the air itself seemed to vibrate with anticipation. "Order in the court." Sinclair pronounced the words with that authoritative tone he had perfected over decades on the bench. His eyes swept over the crowd before settling on the 11 professors seated in a special row facing the bench. "Professors from the University of Sydney, thank you for your presence. Today, we will conduct an evaluation that, frankly, I consider a waste of time, but which the accused has insisted upon." Jazz stood next to Bronnie, her posture erect despite the exhaustion she felt in every fiber of her being. 24 hours without sleep, studying technical vocabulary that most people would take years to master, but she wasn't most people. Professor Andrew Drew Vaughan stood up, adjusting his glasses with a gesture that conveyed academic superiority. He was a thin man, with dark hair, slicked back with gel, and that expression of someone who considers formal knowledge the only valid knowledge. "Your Honor," he began, his voice clear and academic, "my colleagues and I have prepared a series of rigorous evaluations. This is not simply about conversing in different languages, but about demonstrating technical mastery, deep cultural comprehension, and the capacity for specialized translation. We aim to test real expertise, not surface-level chatter." "Proceed," Sinclair motioned with his hand, leaning back in his chair as if about to witness a cheap magic show. Vaughan opened a thick folder. "Miss Tran, we will begin with Mandarin. Professor Yuki Tanaka, although a specialist in Japanese, also dominates Mandarin and will assess this first section." A middle-aged Asian woman stood up. Professor Tanaka had a serene presence, but her gaze was analytical, dissecting Jazz with every passing second. The professor spoke in perfect, fluid Mandarin, asking Jazz to read a medical text and then explain its meaning in English. She handed her a document. Jazz took the paper. It was a complex medical text about cardiovascular procedures, full of technical terminology that would make any professional translator sweat. The room held its breath. Jazz read the document in silence for 30 seconds. Then, without hesitation, she began to speak in fluent Mandarin. Her pronunciation was impeccable, her tones precise. She not only read the text, but explained it, adding cultural context about how certain Chinese medical terms differ in concept from Western ones. Then she switched to English without pause, translating not just the words but the deep meaning, explaining the medical implications with a level of detail that left even Professor Tanaka visibly astonished. The professor murmured something in Mandarin to Vaughan, commenting that Jazz's pronunciation was perfect and impossible for someone without formal training. "I know," Jazz responded in the same language, looking directly at Tanaka. Then she switched to English. "Because I learned from the Chen family diplomats posted to the Canberra High Commission, who lived 6 years in Beijing. Their little girl taught me not only the language but the songs, the games, the ways of thinking. Language isn't just words, Professor, it's the soul." A murmur ran through the courtroom. Journalist Marco Delgado scribbled frantically in his notebook. This was journalistic gold. "Next language," Vaughan said curtly, clearly uncomfortable with what he had just witnessed. "German, Professor Hans Müller." Müller was a stout man, with a blond beard and a stern, typically Germanic expression. He stood up and spoke in clipped German with a deliberately complicated accent, asking Jazz to explain the clauses of a legal contract and its legal implications. He handed her a dense legal contract, full of German legal jargon that even native lawyers would find challenging. Jazz read it, and again her response was more than perfect. She not only translated but identified potential legal problems in the contract, pointed out linguistic ambiguities that could cause disputes, and did it all while fluently alternating between German and English. Müller looked at her with a mix of astonishment and bewilderment. He asked her in German where she had learned all that. Jazz replied in fluent German before translating into English. "From the Schneider family, Mr. Schneider was an international lawyer posted to the Sydney consulate. His wife used to sit me in his home office while he worked. I was 10, and I read his contracts while he thought I was just drawing. I learned that legal German is like a puzzle where every word has an exact weight. It's all about precision. Bronnie Davis watched with tears in her eyes. This was more than she had hoped for. Jazz wasn't just demonstrating competence, she was demonstrating mastery. Arabic, Vaughn practically spat the word. Professor Amira Hassan. Hassan was an elegant woman with an intelligent, calculating expression. She spoke in classical Arabic, the kind used in religious and academic texts, deliberately archaic and complex. She asked Jazz to read a religious text and explain its deep philosophical meaning. It was a text with complex philosophical commentaries. Jazz closed her eyes for a moment, and when she opened them, there was something different in her expression. She began to recite in Arabic, her voice taking on that particular melodic cadence of the well-spoken language. She not only translated the text but explained the multiple layers of interpretation, the historical references, the theological debates the passage had generated over centuries. She spoke about how classical Arabic differs from modern Arabic, about the inherent poetry in every verse. Hassan stood up, visibly moved. "How is this possible? This requires years of theological study." "The Al-Rahman family," Jazz replied softly in English. "The father was an imam. He taught me that Arabic isn't just a language. It's a way of seeing the universe. That every word has a root, a history, a connection to other words. It is a language that breathes poetry. The Torah de sensus de ramas, very forma and when port forms, is one with a turning to sitter." Justice Sinclair was no longer leaning back in his chair. He was leaning forward. His expression had changed from mockery to something that might have been involuntary respect. One by one, the professors presented their challenges. Russian with Professor Igor Volkov, who asked her to recite classic literature and explain complex literary symbolism. French, with culinary and wine terminology so specific that only a professional sommelier or chef would know. Italian, with opera and music. Brazilian Portuguese, with complex regional idioms. Japanese, with multiple writing systems. Korean, with intricate formality levels. Each time, Jazz not only met but exceeded expectations, and each time she added that personal dimension, that story of learning that revealed not just technical knowledge, but deep understanding and a genuine love for each language. When Professor Volkov asked her to explain a passage of classic Russian literature, Jazz not only translated the words, but captured the melancholy soul of the text, explaining historical and emotional contexts that only someone truly immersed in Russian culture could understand. "The Ivanov family," she explained. "Mr. Ivanov was a literature professor posted to the Melbourne consulate. He would read Dostoevsky to me while his wife prepared borscht. I was 12 and I'd cry at the stories. He told me that if you can't feel the Russian suffering in the words, you're not truly reading the masters." The professor assessing French presented her with a text on wines with terminology so specialized, it seemed designed to make even professional translators fail. Jazz not only identified every grape variety, every wine region mentioned, but explained the cultural subtleties of why certain French words to describe wine have no exact English translation. "Monsieur Dubois was a sommelier," she explained with a nostalgic smile. "He let me smell the wines while he worked. He said the French of wine is liquid poetry. Every word evokes the land, the sun, the time. You don't translate it, you feel it." But then came the moment that would change everything. The last language was Hebrew. Vaughn, who also dominated Hebrew in addition to English, stood up personally for this evaluation. He had saved what he considered his master stroke for the end. "Miss Tran," he said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes, "this last text is particularly challenging. It's an ancient philosophical treatise on ethics and justice, extremely complex even for dedicated scholars. I doubt even your personal tutelage could have covered this." He handed her the document. Jazz began to read, and suddenly her expression changed. It wasn't confusion or difficulty, it was recognition. "Professor Vaughn," she said slowly, "this text, I know this text. En fall of so with kansi, final of flatus dames, and in final of flatus dames." "You know it?" Vaughn smiled smugly. "I highly doubt you've had access to ancient Hebrew philosophical manuscripts." "Not the manuscript." Jazz looked up, her eyes shining with something dangerous. "I know the translation, because I did it." The silence that fell over the room was absolute. Even the ventilation system seemed to stop buzzing. "Excuse me?" Vaughn blinked. Jazz pointed to the document. 6 years ago, when I was 17, I worked for an online translation service under a pseudonym, the Polyglot Battler. An anonymous client requested the translation of this philosophical treatise from ancient Hebrew into modern English. He paid well, but requested complete anonymity. She turned towards Vaughn, her voice gaining strength. I spent 3 weeks working on this, researching every word, every concept. It was one of my first professional jobs. And you, Professor Vaughn, published an academic paper 4 years ago, titled New Interpretations of Hebrew Ethical Texts. I read that article. You used my translation, word for word, without credit. That is called plagiarism, mate. The room erupted in scandalized whispers. Vaughn visibly paled. That is an absurd accusation, he stammered. Do you have any proof? I have all my work files, Jazz responded calmly, including the translation notes, draft versions, correspondence with the client, all saved on my laptop, the same laptop that is in the Crown's possession as evidence. Bronnie Davis leapt to her feet. Your Honor, I request immediate access to those digital files. If what my client says is true, it not only proves her competence, but exposes academic fraud right here in your court. Crown Prosecutor Finch looked like a cornered animal. Your Honor, this is a distraction. It is not relevant to the case. Not relevant? Justice Sinclair finally found his voice. Mr. Finch, if the accused can demonstrate that one of the assessors I handpicked used her work without credit, that is extremely relevant to this case. It shows she is not only competent, but has been competent for years. It dismantles your entire case against her being a fraudster. He turned towards Vaughn, his expression now cold. Professor Vaughn, do you have anything to say? Vaughn opened and closed his mouth like a fish out of water. The other professors looked at him with mixtures of shock and disgust. In the academic world, plagiarism was the unforgivable sin. I received that translation from a colleague. I didn't know it was from an online service. I assumed it was public work. Assumed. Professor Hassan stood up, her voice cutting. Professor Vaughn, academic protocol requires verifying the source of all material. This is basic. It's not about assuming. Professor Mueller added in a severe tone. If this is true, the University of Sydney will have to formally investigate. Your reputation is kaput. Sinclair banged his gavel. Order! Sheriff's Officer Williams, bring the evidence laptop, now. While they waited, Jazz remained standing, her heart pounding, but her expression calm. She had waited 6 years for this moment. 6 years since she saw her work published under someone else's name. She never thought justice would arrive this way, but life had strange ways of completing circles. Williams returned with the laptop in an evidence bag. The court technician turned it on, and under judicial supervision, Bronnie navigated to the files Jazz indicated. Everything was there. The draft versions of the translation dated 6 years ago, the detailed notes explaining every translation decision, the emails with the client, and the most damning evidence, the final version, word for word identical to the one Vaughn had published in his supposedly original article. Justice Sinclair examined the files personally, his expression growing darker with each document he reviewed. Finally, he looked up at Vaughn. Professor, I strongly suggest you contact your union. You're going to need legal representation. He turned towards the other 10 professors. Does anyone else have doubts about Miss Tran's linguistic competence? One by one, each professor shook their head. Professor Hassan even stood up. Your Honor, in my 20 years assessing linguistic competence, I have never seen anyone with the mastery this young woman has demonstrated today. She doesn't just speak these languages, she lives them, understands them, at levels most academics can only aspire to. And she did it without resources, without privilege, just with sheer determination and a genuine love for learning. Hassan's words resonated in the courtroom. Sinclair leaned back in his chair, passing a hand over his face. For the first time in decades, he looked genuinely unsure of how to proceed. Mr. Finch, he said finally, do you have anything further to present? The prosecutor slowly rose. He knew he had lost. Your Honor, in light of these developments, and considering that 2 of the 3 prosecuting clients have withdrawn their accusations and confessed to lying under corporate pressure, the Crown requests to withdraw all charges. The murmur in the courtroom turned into a roar. Sinclair banged his gavel repeatedly. Order! Order in my court! Wiesing Bia, I once of the Fairfiver. When silence returned, Sinclair looked at Jazz for a long moment. In his eyes was something that had never been there before. Miss Tran, he began, his voice unusually soft. This court owes you an apology. I owe you an apology. I allowed prejudice, the assumption that talent requires institutional validation, to cloud my judgment. I assumed you were just a fraudster from the western suburbs, when you have proven that true talent transcends institutions. 19 meet. Coming sang that is resistera, and franda. He paused, as if the following words cost him physical effort to pronounce. All charges against you are withdrawn. You are free of all accusations. Furthermore, I order that your laptop and all your personal effects be returned to you immediately. The invisible woman is now visible. Go well. He banged the gavel one last time. This case is closed. The courtroom erupted in applause. Bronny embraced Jazz, both crying. Journalists ran towards the exits to publish the news. The professors surrounded Jazz, offering apologies, job offers, academic opportunities. But Jazz could only think of one thing. Finally, after a lifetime of being underestimated, the world had heard her voice. And that voice had spoken in 12 languages. The metal doors of the Long Bay Remand Center opened with a metallic screech that sounded like celestial music. Jazz took her first step as a free woman in days that had felt like years. The afternoon sun hit her face with an intensity that almost made her recoil. Freedom, vindication, justice. But the scene that awaited her outside was not the tranquility she had imagined. Dozens of journalists descended upon her like waves breaking against the coast, cameras flashing, microphones extending like tentacles, voices shouting questions that blended into an incomprehensible chaos. Miss Tran, how do you feel? Is Jazz going to sue Justice Sinclair? Tell us about Professor Vaughn. Is it true you speak 12 languages? Bronny appeared at her side, forming a protective shield with her body as they tried to make their way to the waiting vehicle. But before they could advance 2 meters, an elegant woman cut directly into their path. She was imposing in stature, with perfectly styled silver hair and a suit that screamed power and money. Linda Harrington, according to the corporate ID tag hanging from her neck, CEO of Global Austrans Translation Services. Miss Tran, her voice cut through the surrounding noise with natural authority. I am Linda Harrington. I need to speak with you now. Mrs. Harrington, my client has just been released. Bronny intervened. It's not an appropriate time. I understand perfectly, but what I have to tell you cannot wait. Harrington looked directly at Jazz, completely ignoring Bronny. Your case has generated international attention. I have 17 job offers from different countries for you, and something more important. Information about your nana that I think you'll want to hear. Jazz stopped dead. My nana? What do you know about my nana? Not here. Harrington gestured towards a black limousine discreetly parked half a block away. 5 minutes of your time. If you want to leave afterwards, I will personally drive you wherever you wish. And data first size, we manda for data formos. And data formos. Bronny squeezed Jazz's arm in a warning, but there was something in Harrington's eyes that wasn't threatening. It was urgency mixed with respect. All right, Jazz agreed. 5 minutes. Inside the limousine, away from the chaos of journalists, Harrington handed her a leather folder. 20 years ago, I was the HR director at one of the country's most prestigious translation agencies. Your nana, Lucia Tran, applied for a position. We rejected her. Jazz felt a pang of pain in her chest. Why are you telling me this? Because we made the same mistake the system made with you. Lucia spoke 6 languages fluently, but she had no university degrees. We rejected her without even properly assessing her. She wrote me a letter after that interview, a letter I've kept for 2 decades because I was too ashamed to reread it. Harrington took a yellowed envelope from the folder. The handwriting was her nana's. Jazz would recognize it anywhere. Read it. Inflexus, in the gray back, inflexus, inflexus, inflexus. With trembling hands, Jazz opened the envelope and began to read. Her nana's words flowed from the page like a river of wisdom and pain. Dear Mrs. Harrington, I don't blame you for rejecting me. The world works with papers, not capabilities. But I want you to know that I will dedicate my life to ensuring my granddaughter never has to beg for opportunities she deserves. I will teach her everything I know, and someday, when she succeeds, I hope you remember that talent does not need external validation to be real. Jazz finished reading with tears rolling down her cheeks. Her nana had always known. She had always planned to prepare her for a world that would reject them both. When I saw your case on the news, Harrington continued softly, I instantly knew who you were, Lucia's granddaughter, the girl she wrote about in that letter. And I realized I had a chance to correct an error I made 2 decades ago. What do you want from me? Jazz asked directly. I want to hire you not as a common translator, but as the director of untapped talent. Your job will be to identify and recruit people like you. People with extraordinary skills but without traditional credentials. People the system ignores. The invisible talent. Then and now, making dime. First Oland. Mike last first Olden. The offer was tempting, almost too good to be true, but something in Harrington's expression told Jazz there was more. What else? She pressed. Harrington smiled slightly. You're sharp. Good. There's something else. Your Nana worked for many diplomatic families, as you know, but one family in particular, the Morrisons, who she worked for during the last 5 years of her life, were British diplomats. They left the country abruptly 3 years ago, and they left something for you, something your Nana asked them to hold on to until you were ready. Mr. Morrison contacted me yesterday after seeing your case on the news. He's in the city. He wants to meet you. Before Jazz could respond, her phone, recently returned by the police, began to ring incessantly. Missed calls, text messages, exploding social media notifications. One message in particular caught her attention. It was from an unknown number with an international prefix. Ms. Tran, I'm Agent Samuel Cross of the International Refugee Organization. Your story has resonated with millions. We have a proposal that could change lives. Please contact me urgently. Bronnie, who had been checking her own phone, looked up with an expression of shock. Jazz, you need to see this. She showed her screen. The video of the hearing had gone viral. More than 15 million views in under 6 hours. The hashtag number Justice for Jazz was trending worldwide. But it wasn't just that. There was another video published just minutes ago. Someone had leaked the security recordings from the remand center. In them, Jazz was clearly seen studying all night, murmuring in different languages, preparing with a determination that bordered on the superhuman. The whole world is talking about you, Bronnie murmured. You're a symbol now, an Aussie battler who beat the Pommies at their own game. I don't want to be a symbol, Jazz replied, her voice tired. I just want to live my life. Too late for that, Harrington intervened pragmatically. You now have a platform. The question is, what are you going to do with it? The phone rang again. This time it was a number Jazz recognized. Carmel, her cellmate. Jazz, I need you to come. It's urgent. Carmel, what's wrong? It's about the center director. Turns out he has secrets too, and I think they're connected to your Nana, but I can't talk on the phone. You have to come. The call abruptly cut out. Jazz looked at Bronnie with growing alarm. Something's wrong. Carmel sounded scared. Before they could decide what to do, another figure appeared at the limousine window. An older man, in his 60s, with a gentle but urgent expression, tapped the glass softly. Harrington rolled down the window. Dr. Jones. Mrs. Harrington, thank you for contacting me. The man spoke with a refined British accent. Miss Tran, I am Dr. Rhys Jones. I worked as the personal physician for the Morrison family for years. I also attended to your Nana, Lucia, in her final months. Jazz got out of the limousine, feeling the world spinning too fast. You knew my Nana? I knew her very well, and there are things about her passing that you need to know. Things she made me promise to tell you when the time was right. What things? Dr. Jones looked nervously around. Not here. There are people who would prefer certain information remain buried. Your Nana didn't die of a simple heart attack, Miss Tran. There were complications she kept secret. Complications related to something she discovered while working for the Morrisons' documents. Sensitive information about trafficking networks that used diplomatic families as cover. Jazz's heart began to pound. What did she discover? Documents. Information sensitive about human trafficking networks that used diplomatic families as cover. Are you saying my Nana was? I don't know for certain, the doctor interrupted quickly. What I do know is that she left evidence, stored away evidence the Morrisons protected after her death. And now that you are in the public eye, there are people who will want to make sure that evidence never sees the light of day. They saw your case as a perfect way to discredit you before you could become a problem. Bronnie stepped protectively beside Jazz. Dr. Jones, these are serious accusations. Do you have proof? I have Lucia's complete medical records, and I have the letters she wrote me in her last days. Letters where she specifically mentions that if anything happened to her, I should contact her granddaughter when she was strong enough to handle the truth. He pulled a thick envelope from his briefcase. This is just the beginning, Miss Tran. Your Nana meticulously documented everything. Names, dates, trafficking routes. She stored it all in a safety deposit box at an international bank, and you are the only person authorized to open it. Jazz took the envelope, feeling its weight not just physical but emotional. Where is that box? Geneva, Switzerland. The International Helvetia Bank. Your Nana gave me the exact instructions before she died. She said, When Jazz proves to the world what she's capable of, when she can no longer be ignored or silenced, then she will be ready to know the whole truth. The words resonated in the silence of the limousine. Her whole life, Jazz had thought her Nana was simply a domestic worker who loved languages, but now she was discovering she had been much more. A woman who had witnessed injustices and had the courage to confront them, even knowing the price she might pay. "There's something else," Dr. Jones added, his expression becoming even more serious. "The third client who accused you, the one who never withdrew his charges, his name is Richard Blackwood. He works for a private security corporation with deep connections in diplomatic circles. I don't think it's a coincidence that he was the only one who maintained the accusations until the very end. The attack on you was premeditated. We for Downham. Are you suggesting my accusation was orchestrated?" Jazz felt a chill run down her spine. "I'm suggesting that when your case went public, certain people saw an opportunity to discredit you before you could become a problem, before you could discover what your Nana knew." Bronnie grabbed her phone. "We need police protection now." But before she could make the call, a black van stopped abruptly in front of the limousine. A middle-aged man with a serious expression and a federal identification badge hanging from his neck stepped out. "I'm Agent Samuel Cross, Miss Tran," he said. "I need you to come with me. Your life may be in danger. We've been monitoring communications related to your case and just intercepted a very worrying conversation. There's an active contract out on you. Someone wants to make sure you never make it to Geneva. Yesta, Vinein, and Truthils, Controde, Kozan, Enfos, and on fine." "How did you know where to find me?" Jazz asked, her survival instinct activating. "Because we have an asset within the prison system who has been watching the director. They just confirmed the director of the Long Bay Remand Center, Mr. Mendez, has deep ties to the Blackwood Corporation, and they confirmed he was aware of your Nana's activities." Ifan Dooley Sov. The world Jazz had just reclaimed was about to become much more dangerous, and the answers she sought were thousands of kilometers away in a safety deposit box that contained secrets someone was willing to kill to protect. The decision was instantaneous. Jazz looked Agent Cross directly in the eyes. "I'm not going anywhere until I speak to Carmel. She needs me. She told me the director was involved, and she risked everything to help me when no one else would. I won't abandon her now." "Miss Tran, you don't understand the gravity," Cross insisted. "I'll go with you," Dr. Jones intervened unexpectedly. "If there's a connection between the center director and what your Nana discovered, you need to know, and I can help protect you." Harrington closed her phone. "I have contacts in private security. I can have a team there in 10 minutes. We'll cover your back, Agent Cross." Cross sighed, recognizing he had lost this battle. "All right, but I'm coming with you. And if I see anything suspicious, we leave immediately. No questions asked." 15 minutes later, they were back at the Long Bay Remand Center. The building Jazz had left with relief now received her with a sense of menace she hadn't felt before. Fluorescent lights flickered, casting unsettling shadows in the white corridors. Officer Dani Cortez, a young guard with a kind expression who had always been gentle with Jazz, waited for them at the entrance. "Miss Tran, thank goodness you came," she whispered nervously. "Carmel is very distressed. She keeps saying the director has something to do with your Nana. I don't understand what she means, but she insists she'll only talk to you." "Where is Director Mendez?" Cross asked in a professional tone. "In his office. He's been making calls all day. Since Miss Tran's case went viral, he's been extremely nervous." Cortez guided them through corridors Jazz knew too well. When they reached cell 47C, Carmel was sitting on her bunk, hugging her knees with an expression that mixed fear and determination. "Carmel," Jazz rushed to her. "Thank goodness you came. I thought maybe you wouldn't after everything you went through here." "Carmel, what's wrong? What did you find out?" Carmel looked nervously at the others present. Cross showed his federal identification. "Everything you say here is protected. If you have relevant information, we need to hear it." "Know that. Thanks first to Grangso." Carmel took a deep breath. 2 days ago, I was doing the night cleaning near Director Mendez's office. The door was ajar, and I overheard a phone conversation. He was talking to someone about you, Jazz. He was saying things like, "The old woman was a problem, and the granddaughter can't find out what she found." Jazz's heart stopped. "The old woman." He was referring to my Nana? I thought so at first, but I wasn't sure. Then, today, after they released you, he was more agitated. He made another call. This time I heard clearly. He mentioned the name Lucia Tran, and something about documents that should never reach her granddaughter's hands. He sounded utterly rattled. Dr. Jones stepped forward. "Carmel, Did he mention the Morrison families or international networks? Yes, Carmel nodded vigorously. He said, the Morrisons were bloody fools for keeping those papers that they should have destroyed them when they had the chance. He was panicking about the news coverage. Mike Samsa Fanktha and B.O. Cross pulled out his phone and began making urgent calls. Bronnie sat down, her mind working at full speed, processing the legal implications. But Jazz could only feel one thing: rage. Rage that her Nana had been put in danger. Rage that her passing was possibly not natural. Rage that even now, years later, the shadows of the past continued to pursue them. I need to talk to him, she said, in a dangerously calm voice. I need to talk to Mendes now. The Braktivedia are kin to the Resin our country. Jazz, that's not prudent, Bronnie warned. I don't care about prudence. Jazz turned to Cross. You're a federal agent. You can make it official. I need answers about my Nana. Cross considered for a moment. Then he nodded. I'll ask the questions, but you come with me. And if it gets dangerous, we leave. But I have a feeling the truth about your Nana is in that office, and it's time to bring it into the light. Director Augusto Mendez's office was on the 3rd floor. He was a thick-set man with thinning hair and that kind of nervousness that only guilt can generate. When Cross entered, flashing his federal ID, the color drained from Mendez's face. Agent, how can I help you? His voice trembled slightly. Director Mendez, I have some questions about Lucia Tran. The director blinked repeatedly. Lucia Tran? I don't know anyone by that name. Liar. Jazz walked into the office, ignoring Cross's attempt to stop her. My Nana worked cleaning this center during the last year of her life. You knew her, and it seems you also knew what she had discovered. Mendez stood up abruptly. Miss Tran, I don't know what you're talking about. Then let me refresh your memory. Cross took out his recorder. I have witnesses who heard you talking about the old woman and about documents. Would you care to explain that? The director began to sweat visibly. His eyes darted between Cross, Jazz, and the door, like a trapped animal looking for an escape. I just worked here. I didn't know anything about what she did outside. But you did know something. Jazz leaned over the desk. My Nana passed away 2 years ago. Her passing was sudden, convenient, right before she could testify about what she had discovered. I had nothing to do with her death, Mendez shouted, losing composure. It was her heart. The doctor said so. Vizier, Natanet. Vizier, Natanet. Vizier. So you did know her, Cross observed coldly. A moment ago you said you didn't know anyone by that name. Mendez slumped into his chair, defeated. All right. I knew Lucia. She worked here cleaning for months. She was a good woman, quiet. But one day, she came to me with information. Dangerous information. What information? Jazz felt tears threatening to fall, but she held them back with sheer willpower. She said that while working for the diplomatic families, she had seen things. Documents about people being moved illegally, families used as cover for criminal operations. She showed me copies. She asked me to help her report it to the appropriate authorities. And you did? Mendez lowered his gaze, unable to face Jazz's eyes. I told her I would, but I was scared. The people involved were powerful. They had connections. They had money. So I reported her intentions to someone else. Intentie so $5 so $5 so where $5 so this in 25. The silence that fell in the office was heavier than any verbal accusation. You betrayed her, Jazz whispered the words barely audible. My Nana trusted you, and you sold her out. You were the snake in the grass. I didn't know what they were going to do. Mendez had tears running down his face. They only told me they would keep her monitored, that they would make sure she didn't cause trouble. I never thought they would. They would kill her. My Valenkes. In this one and the start even does. You never thought they would kill her? Jazz finished the sentence. I don't know if they did. Mendez sobbed openly now. Her death was natural according to all the reports, but I always wondered. I always lived with that doubt. And then I started getting payments. Hush money. From a company called Blackwood. Cross was already on the phone, requesting forensic teams, arrest warrants, full investigations, but Jazz could barely hear anything beyond the roaring of blood in her ears. Dr. Jones placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. Jazz, there's one more thing you need to know. Something your Nana gave me before she died. From his briefcase, he pulled a small envelope, worn by time. She asked me to give it to you when you were ready. I believe this is the moment. With trembling hands, Jazz opened the envelope. Inside was a letter written in her Nana's handwriting, the same script she had seen in cookbooks, on shopping notes, in messages of maternal love. My dearest Jazz, if you are reading this, it means I am no longer with you. It means Dr. Jones kept his promise, and it means you are finally strong enough to know the whole truth. All your life I taught you languages. I taught you that words have power, that communication builds bridges, that understanding others is understanding the world. But I never told you why it was so important to me that you learned. When I was young, I witnessed injustices I could not stop. I saw people being exploited, families being separated, innocents being hurt. And I couldn't do anything because I had no power. I had no voice. I had no way to be heard. But you, my love, you have something I never had. You have the gift of tongues. You can speak for those who have no voice. You can translate not just words, but injustices into justice, silence into truth. The documents I left in Geneva are not just evidence of crimes. They are the voices of people who need to be heard, and you are the only one who can give them that voice. I know the path will be difficult. I know there will be people who will try to silence you, as they tried to silence me. But I also know you are stronger than I ever was. Because you don't just have knowledge, you have courage. You're the true Aussie battler I prepared. Don't cry for me, my little one. If my heart stopped before I could see your triumph, I will know it was because it gave everything to prepare you. And that is enough. Every language I taught you, every story I shared, every moment we spent together was preparing you for this moment, for when the world would finally listen to you. Now go. Go to Geneva, open that box, tell those stories, give voice to the silenced. And when you do, you will know that your Nana is proud, not because you speak 10 languages or 12, but because you chose to use your gift for something bigger than yourself. I love you, my girl. I always have. I always will. Your Nana Lucia. Jazz finished reading, and the tears she had held back for days finally flowed freely. They were not just tears of sadness, but of comprehension, of purpose, of love that transcended even death. Carmel hugged her, crying too. Bruni had tears rolling down her cheeks. Even Cross, the hardened federal agent, had to discreetly wipe his eyes. Dr. Jones spoke softly. Your Nana knew her time was limited. Her heart was weak, and the stress of what she had discovered worsened it. But she didn't stop. She kept documenting. She kept gathering evidence. She kept fighting, because she knew you would continue her work. Jazz folded the letter carefully, holding it against her chest, as if it were her Nana's embrace. I'll go to Geneva, she said, her voice clear despite the tears. I'll finish what she started. You won't go alone. Harrington walked into the office, her expression determined. My company has offices in Switzerland. You'll have all the protection and resources you need, and I'm coming with you. I'm coming too, Bruni added, as your solicitor and your mate. Me too, Carmel said surprisingly. I'm out in 2 days, and after what they did to your Nana, I want to help. I'll be your eyes on the ground back home. Cross closed his phone. The Australian Federal Police and the FBI are interested in this case. You'll have federal protection during the trip. And Mendez, he turned to the sobbing director. You are under arrest for obstruction of justice and conspiracy. As Mendez was escorted out of his office in handcuffs, Jazz felt something change inside her. She was no longer just a young woman trying to prove her worth. She was the heiress to a legacy of courage and justice. Her Nana had planted seeds of hope in the form of languages. Now those seeds had grown into something more powerful, a voice that could not be silenced. At that moment, Harrington's phone rang. She answered briefly, her expression turning serious. It's Mrs. Morrison. She's in the city. She says she has something else. Your Nana left her. Something she didn't even trust to the bank. She wants to meet you tonight. Jazz nodded. Every revelation brought her closer to fully understanding who her Nana had been and what she had sacrificed. Then let's go, she said. There's no time to waste, because somewhere, in a safety deposit box in Geneva, awaited truths that would change lives, and Jasmine Tran was ready to give them voice. The hotel where Mrs. Margaret Morrison was staying was one of those places that whispered stories of lives lived with elegance and purpose, likely a spot for high commission staff. Jazz, accompanied by Bruni, Dr. Jones, and Harrington, was received in a suite with a view of the illuminated city. Margaret Morrison was a woman with perfectly styled silver hair, blue eyes that had seen too much of the world, and that dignity that only comes from a life dedicated to serving something greater than oneself. When she saw Jazz, her eyes filled with tears. You are exactly as she said you would be, Margaret whispered, taking Jazz's hands in hers. Lucia spoke of you every day. She said you were her masterpiece, her living legacy. Mrs. Morrison, what do you know about my Nana? Margaret invited them to sit, Her hands trembled slightly as she prepared the tea. "Your Nana Lucia worked for my family for 5 years. She wasn't just our employee, she was part of our family. My husband was the British High Commissioner, and Lucia was with us at every posting. But what no one knew is that Lucia had a special gift. You are, leftöd, duden those. What gift? She could read people, understand intentions, and her knowledge of languages allowed her to listen to conversations others believed were private. She was the perfect, invisible woman to those blow-ins." Margaret paused, her eyes distant with memories. "One night, during a diplomatic reception at our official residence in Canberra, Lucia was serving when she overheard a conversation in Russian between 2 diplomats. They were discussing a network that used diplomatic families as cover to move people against their will, human trafficking. The silence in the room was absolute. Lucia came to me that night, trembling. She told me everything. My husband and I were horrified. He wanted to report it immediately, but Lucia insisted on gathering more evidence first. For months, she meticulously documented everything: names, dates, routes. She used her invisible position to be present in meetings where no one thought she understood what they were saying. "And why didn't you report it when you had enough evidence?" Margaret stood up and went to a small chest on the table. "Because we discovered that the network had connections at high levels in multiple governments. We didn't know who to trust. Then my husband passed away. A sudden heart attack during a diplomatic meeting." Her voice cracked. "Officially, it was his heart, but I have always wondered. Just before he passed, he had said he was ready to expose everything, regardless of the consequences. Lucia was scared after that," Margaret continued. "Scared that the same thing would happen to her, but not scared for herself, scared of leaving you alone, Jazz, so she gave me this." She opened the chest, "And she made me promise to only give it to you when you were strong enough, when the world was ready to listen to you." In the waited after fist, and the waited after fist. In the waited after fist elation, and the waited after fist. From the chest, she took out a small external hard drive and a thick envelope. "Here is everything. Audio recordings of diplomatic meetings where these operations were discussed. Photographs, original documents, and most importantly, testimonies from victims Lucia met and secretly helped over the years." She compiled it all into a single, encrypted file. Jazz took the drive with trembling hands. It was small, but it contained the weight of entire lives. "There's one more thing," Margaret added softly. "The box in Geneva contains the documentary evidence, but this," she pointed to the drive, "contains the voices, the real stories of people who were silenced. Lucia recorded them with permission, in their own languages. She knew you would be the one to finally translate them, the one to give their voice to the world. She prepared you to be their translator of hope." That night, Jazz barely slept. With headphones on, she listened hour after hour to the recordings. Voices in Mandarin, in Arabic, in Russian, in languages she knew intimately. Stories of separated families, of broken promises, of destroyed hopes. And in every recording, at the end, was her Nana's voice, her mother bird, promising that their stories would be told. When dawn broke, Jazz had dry tears on her cheeks, but a renewed fire in her soul. The flight to Geneva left the next day. Jazz traveled with Bronny, Carmel, who had been released as promised, Harrington, and a security escort coordinated by Agent Cross. The AFP had discovered that Richard Blackwood, the third client, was actually a private security operative contracted to discredit Jazz before she could become a public voice. He was arrested attempting to flee the country. Geneva greeted them with gray skies, but with promises of justice. The International Helvetia Bank was a fortress of marble and steel, designed to protect secrets for generations. In a private room with a Swiss notary present, Jazz opened safety deposit box number 4721. Inside were meticulously organized folders, each labeled in her Nana's handwriting, with names, dates, locations. But what most impacted Jazz was finding an old photo album at the bottom of the box. Photos of herself throughout the years. Her first day of school, learning to write in Arabic, reading books in French. Each photo had a note from her Nana on the back. The last photo was of Jazz at 16, smiling while holding a certificate from an online translation course. The note read, "The day I knew you were ready, all that was left was for the world to be ready too. Nate, my scent, indecent, nascent, and 5 life." Jazz hugged the album against her chest, sobbing. Bronny hugged her, then Carmel, then everyone present. It was a moment of pain and love intertwined so deeply that there were no words in any language to adequately describe it. The following weeks were a whirlwind. Jazz, with the help of Bronny and an international legal team, presented all the evidence to the International Court of Justice. The case caused an earthquake in diplomatic circles. 3 international trafficking networks were dismantled. 17 corrupt officials were arrested in 6 different countries. But more important than the arrests was what Jazz did with the recordings. She created a documentary titled Voices from the Silence. In it, she personally translated every testimony, giving a voice to those who had been silenced. She didn't just translate words, she captured emotions, cultural contexts, the essential humanity of each story. The documentary went globally viral, hitting over 100 million views in the first week. Governments were forced to respond. Policies changed. Lives were saved. Ambassador Klaus Zimmermann of the United Nations personally contacted Jazz. Ms. Tran, your work has exposed injustices that governments ignored for decades. On behalf of the United Nations, I would like to offer you a position as special translator for human rights. Your job would be to give voice to people the world needs to hear. You're a game changer. Jazz accepted, but with one condition, that the position include a program to identify and train other young talents without formal credentials. Real talent, she argued, should not need institutional validation to be recognized. We need to hire the next generation of invisible women and men. Her proposal was accepted unanimously. 6 months after the day Jazz had been arrested, she stood in the same Supreme Court of NSW courtroom where she had once been humiliated. But this time she wasn't a defendant. She was a keynote speaker at an international conference on linguistic justice. Justice Lachlan Sinclair was present at the back of the courtroom. He had retired early after his handling of Jazz's case generated investigations into other cases where he may have allowed prejudice to affect his judgment. At the end of her speech, Sinclair approached her. Miss Tran, his voice was humble, so different from the arrogant man he had been. There's no apology sufficient for how I treated you, but I want you to know that your case changed my life. It forced me to confront prejudices I didn't even know I had. I'm now working with the Judicial Commission to implement reforms that prevent other judges from making the same mistakes I made. I gave you a raw deal, and I'm sorry, mate. Justice Sinclair, Jazz responded. Forgiveness doesn't erase the harm, but it opens paths to something better. Your acknowledgement means more than your apology because it proves that people can change, learn, and grow. They shook hands, and in that gesture was healing, not only for them but as a symbol of what the judicial system could become. Carmel had rebuilt her life with Harrington's help. She now worked coordinating rehabilitation programs for unjustly incarcerated individuals. You gave me hope when I had none, she told Jazz. Now I want to give that same hope to others. Maybe of the Kernby, of the Sud and faction. Bronny Davis received national recognition as Legal Aid Solicitor of the Year. But what made her most proud wasn't the awards, but the letters she received from grateful clients, inspired by her passionate defense of Jazz. Professor Vaughn resigned his position after a university investigation confirmed multiple cases of plagiarism. His fall served as a warning to other academics about the importance of integrity. David Chan, the engineer who had the courage to confess first, established a foundation dedicated to supporting unconventional talents. Jazz taught me that honor is worth more than money or position, he explained in an interview. Sophie, the young woman from the Remand Center who had risked her job to help Jazz, received a full scholarship to study social work, sponsored by the program Jazz had established. A year after the day Jazz had been arrested, she stood in front of the cemetery where her nana was buried. She had traveled from Geneva specifically for this moment. She placed fresh native Australian flowers on the grave and knelt. Nana, she spoke softly. I finished what you started. The voices you helped protect are now being heard by the whole world. The networks you documented were dismantled. The people who tried to silence us failed. I'm not the invisible woman anymore. Ungrabbling, inflakam stor. Ungrabbling, a gentle breeze rustled the leaves of the nearby eucalyptus trees, as if nature itself were listening. But more than that, Nana, I finally understood why you taught me all those languages. It wasn't just about words. It was about empathy, about connection, about understanding that every person, no matter their language or background, has a story that deserves to be heard. It was about giving me the tools to fight the tall poppies. You me that is stay. We get another way, Eddie stay. Jazz took the photo album from her bag, the one she had found in the safety deposit box. She opened it to the last page, where she had pasted a new photo. It was of herself, standing in front of the United Nations, surrounded by people from all corners of the world, people whose stories she had translated, whose voices she had amplified. "Look, Nana, this is what we built together. Your sacrifice was not in vain. Your legacy lives on in every person who now has a voice because of what you taught me." As the sun set, Jazz remained there, feeling a peace she hadn't felt in years. Her Nana had planted seeds of hope in the form of languages. Those seeds had grown into a garden of justice that would continue to flourish long after they were both gone. The next day, Jazz gave her first class in the program she had created. 30 young people from diverse backgrounds, all with extraordinary talents but without formal credentials, looked at her with hope and admiration. "My Nana used to tell me," Jazz began, "that talent doesn't need certificates to be real. It only needs opportunity to shine. You are here because each of you has a unique gift. My job is not to teach you, but to help you recognize the power you already have inside." A young person in the front row raised their hand. "Miss Tran, how do we know we're good enough?" Jazz smiled, remembering when she herself had asked that question. "You're here because you dared to try when the world told you that you couldn't. That determination, that courage, is more valuable than any university degree. Never let anyone tell you you're just a battler who can't make it. You're the best of us." Months turned into years. Jazz's program grew, expanding to 20 countries. Thousands of talented young people found opportunities they never would have had otherwise. Some became translators, others cultural mediators, others human rights activists. But all shared one thing in common: the belief that true talent transcends credentials, and that every voice, no matter how silenced it has been, deserves to be heard. In a special ceremony at the United Nations, Jazz received the International Human Rights Award. As she held the recognition, she thought of all the people who had made this moment possible. Her Nana, who had sacrificed everything. Carmel, who had believed in her when she was at her lowest point. Brani, who had fought for her against all odds. Chan, who had found the courage to tell the truth. In her acceptance speech, Jazz didn't talk about her achievements. She talked about her Nana. Lucia Tran never had a university degree. She never received official recognition for her work. But she understood something the world is only beginning to learn: that a person's worth is not measured in certificates, but in character, not in credentials, but in courage. Her voice broke slightly with emotion. "This award is not mine, it is hers. It belongs to every person who was ever underestimated, ignored, silenced. It is a reminder that extraordinary talent can come from ordinary places, and that sometimes the most powerful people are those the world never noticed. It's for all the invisible women who keep the world running." The standing ovation that followed lasted 5 full minutes. People from all over the world, connected virtually, applauded not just Jazz, but all the Lucias of the world, all the grandmothers, mothers, and invisible workers who had planted seeds of hope without knowing if they would ever blossom. That night, Jazz was in her apartment in Geneva, looking at the illuminated city. Her phone rang. It was an unknown number. "Miss Tran, I'm Maria. I'm 16, and I live in a small town in rural Australia. I saw your documentary. I speak 5 languages. I learned from backpackers and fruit pickers visiting my town. Everyone tells me it's impossible for it to be true without formal education. But you gave me hope that maybe, just maybe, I can have a future too. Can I apply to your program?" Jazz smiled with tears in her eyes. "Of course you can, Maria. Tell me your story." And he has noticed racism story. And as she listened to Maria's story, Jazz understood that this was her Nana's true legacy, not the dismantled networks or the awards received, but every individual life that was touched, every talent that was recognized, every voice that was finally heard. The cycle continued, hope multiplied, and somewhere, Jazz was sure, her Nana Lucia was smiling. Because in the end, this was never a story about languages, or injustice, or trials. It was a story about love. Love from a grandmother who prepared her granddaughter to change the world. A love that transcended death, time, and circumstance. And that love, translated into 12 languages and 1,000 acts of courage, had illuminated the world.